They have prepared a very special workshop for you today on AI. And again, Rosatom is one of the major partners and sponsors of the ICPC. Whenever you have free time this afternoon, you can move upstairs to the 3rd floor and meet the team. Rosatom is an international company working in many regions of the world. So find out if they have something great in the region where you are coming from. And let's give a round of applause to Dmitry. We're just making some technical setup, and we will start in 30 seconds.
Okay, we are starting. Hello for everybody. My name is Dmytry Ivanov. I'm AI expert in Rosatom Corporation. And today we will talk about spiking neural networks with spike time independent plasticity. I think that everybody here knows about classical neural networks. It is an outstanding technology in our world, but they don't take into account many biological properties of our brain, and spiking neural networks are one of the possible ways to fix this problem. Actually, the first part of this talk will be a very quick and very brief introduction to neuroscience. It is very important to understanding the phenomenon of spiking neural networks. The second part of our talk will be lectured by my colleague Dennis, and he will talk about how to implement it in real code. Okay, let's start. So, neuron. I think that you heard something about neurons during your life. It is one of type of cells in our body. Actually, it has very similar to other cells' internal structure. It has ribosomes, it has nucleus, it has DNAs, and so on. But it has membrane. But one of its outstanding features is its shape. The shape of neurons are very complex, and it doesn't similar to another cells. And even among neurons, there are different types of shapes of cells. Neurons, they can form networks. And these very complex structures, like networks, they process information in our brain. We know from neuroscience that neuron is the main processing unit of information in our body. And we need to talk a little bit about neuron membrane. Each cell in our body has membranes, actually, but due to neuron membrane, information processing in our brain happens. As any other cells, neuron is surrounded by ion solution. It is a solution of different type of ions, like calcium, potassium, chloride, and so on. And sometimes neuron exchange information without exchange ions from take in or take out ions from outside world, and it changes its membrane potential because the different gradients of ions form the electrochemical potential, and this is the main way of processing the information, the changing of membrane potential on the neuron. So, to conclude this part of talk, the information processed by a neuron in a charge flow across via membrane. And it is the main way of processing information in our brain. And as I told you, we can measure these electrochemical potentials. Okay, let's suppose that we can put two electrodes, one inside the neuron and one outside the neuron, and we will measure the potential difference between them, and it will be the membrane potential. And let's suppose now that we inject some current to our neuron. On the upper plot, you can see the current plot, and on the down plot, you can see the plot of the behavior of membrane potential. When we started to inject current, there are an exponential increase of membrane potential. But when we stop the current injection, the membrane potential started exponentially to decrease. And this one actually can be described by a differential equation, which one you can see on my slide. And actually, this differential equation, it is the same equation as an equation of RC current circuit. RC circuits, it is a very common from radio techniques type of electrical schemes. And it is very excited that neurons can be modeled in the same way as RC circuit. Okay, so now we have a differential equation which one describes the behavior of our membrane potential. Another important thing in neuron, it is the spikes. Actually, neurons, they don't send information in graded manner. They send very small spikes along the axons. It is one of the branching of neurons. And when the propagation speed of these spikes are rather slow, and okay, so it propagates along the axon, and when it arrives to the axon terminal, a special chemical reaction starts. It starts in the synapse. Synapse, it is a junction between two neurons. When the axon potential spike arrives, its special neurotransmitter starts to release in the synaptic gap between two cells. And then the postsynaptic cell, so the receptor cell, it receives these neurotransmitters, and some changes in membrane potential starts. So this is how neurons communicate with each other. Actually, you can see here that the neuron, it is not a purely electric device. It is electrochemical device, actually. And now we can modify a little bit our equation, and we can add sums. We can replace the right part of our previous equation and add sums of spikes multiplied by their weight. Actually, I forget to talk about what is the weight meaning in the neuroscience. In the image, you can see that there are several receptors on the presynaptic or on the postsynaptic neuron, and there are some neurotransmitters released in the synaptic gap in picture. And different synapses, they have different number of receptors, and they inject different amount of neurotransmitters. And so why the changing in the membrane potential of the postsynaptic neuron varies among different synapses. And this is one of the ways of how learning occurs in our brain. By using special biochemistry mechanism as gene expressions, new receptors appeared, or new neurotransmitters devices appeared, and so on. And also, we add to this model another condition. If the membrane potential reaches some threshold, so we tell that our neuron spikes to fire spike, and then its membrane will reset to 0. Okay, now I would like to show you, it is a numerical simulation of the behavior of membranes, of how it works. You can see on the left upper corner of the image a simple neural network. It has only 4 neurons, first, second, third, and fourth. First 3 neurons, they are presynaptic neurons, and the first is the postsynaptic neuron. Weights between these neurons, they have different strengths. For example, the weight between first and fourth neuron, it has the weight 1.0. Another 0.5, and another it is negative weight. It has 0.9. In neurobiology, these types of neurons are named inhibitory neurons because they inhibit the dynamics of the postsynaptic neuron. Okay, and on the right big 5 plots, on the upper of these 5 plots, you can see the behavior of membrane potential. And on the bottom 3 neurons, 3 plots, you can see the time of spikes of each of presynaptic neuron. So, for example, on time step 1, the second neuron fires a spike, but the weight is rather weak, and so the increase in membrane potential in the upper plot is rather small. Then the exponential decay starts due to our differential equation. For example, on the second, two spikes occurs, and both from excitatory neurons, and there are a big increase in membrane threshold, in membrane potential. And for example, on the 5th second, only inhibitory neurons fires, and there are a decrease in membrane potential below 0. And in this moment, it becomes the raising of potential due to its resting potential, which is 0 in this case. So it was a numerical simulation of how real neurons works. Okay, and now we have a model of neuron. This model is not the most complex model in neuroscience community, but it's rather complex. And we can make now a network, an ordered graph, where the nodes will be these models, and we can start to simulate it and to solve some practical tasks. This notion, so the union of these types of neurons, is named as spiking neural network. It is another way of artificial intelligence. It appears maybe 20 years ago, and now it has very strong development. Many companies like Intel, IBM, and so on, they are trying to build special processes for simulating these neural networks and so on. Okay, and the last slide in my part of talk, it is how we can learn this, can we teach these neural networks. I think that you know that in classical neural networks, you teach your neural networks by using backpropagation mechanisms. But we know that in brain we don't have backpropagation. Actually, we have a phenomena of local learning rules. Local learning rules, it uses only the behavior of presynaptic and postsynaptic neuron. They don't use the behavior of another cells. And one of the possible models of how it works, it is a spike timing dependent plasticity model. What does it mean? If presynaptic neuron fires earlier than postsynaptic one, then we should increase our weight, make it stronger, make connection stronger between these neurons. And if the presynaptic neuron fires, and if postsynaptic neuron fires earlier than presynaptic one, then we should make our weights weaker. For example, I draw here a simple example. You can see a simple neural network with only 3 neurons. The second neuron, it is a postsynaptic one. The first and third neurons are presynaptic ones. And on the right plot, you can see the spike times of these neurons. And for example, let's suppose the first situation. First neuron fires earlier than the second. First, it is a presynaptic neuron. So we should make our weight stronger. And for example, in another case, the third neuron fires later than the second one, and third is also a presynaptic neuron for the second neuron. And so in this case, we should decrease it, the value. And this is one of the mechanisms how our brain works. And one of the way of studying, of teaching spiking neural networks, it is spike timing dependent plasticity mechanisms. And it has strong biological evidences. It was discovered in the end of 1990s years by a big consortium of neuroscientists. And now I think it is interesting to see how it works on real machine learning tasks. And I give the floor to my colleague Dennis. Dennis, the floor is yours.
Hello. So I continue. My name is Dennis Larionov. I lead AI team at Rosatom Global at Cifrum. Can I use laptop for presentation? Okay. So I continue. In my talk, Oh, it doesn't matter. Okay, I'll try to show you an example of local learning rules on the real task, which is handwritten digit recognition. I believe most of you had a practice with MNIST dataset. It contains 60,000 of handwritten digits, and usually we use convolutional or fully connected neural networks to solve these tasks. Today I show you how to use spiking neural networks for solving such a problem. So to start, I recall some Dmitriy's definitions. You see, we use in our experiment leaky, integrate, and fire neuron model. To model neural dynamics, we use leaky model. What doesn't mean leaky? If we inject into neuron constant current I, we see that membrane potential will raise not instantly but exponentially. And if we switch current off, then the membrane potential starts to flow to its resting states. Let's plot membrane potential once again. There is a resting potential, V rest, which is about minus 60 millivolts. And when no one kicks a neuron, the membrane potential flows to this value. But due to synaptic potentials and temporal summation effect, membrane potential starts to grow. And if it reaches some value, which is V threshold, sorry, then a phenomena of spike enables, and membrane potential jumps and then resets to another point, important point, which is V rest. And we have another phenomena, which is refractory period. The neuron cannot fire too high because it has to recharge for the next explosion. So the next we see the differential equation which describes this behavior. It consists of three parts. First one is an excitatory current which raises membrane potential. Second one is inhibitory current, and the last one is resting current. Next, all the currents are defined by conductances. Dmitry talked about it, but every conductance is a dynamic variable itself. Its behavior presents on these slides. The conductance flows exponentially to zero, and when presynaptic spikes arrives to the neuron, it increases by the value of synaptic weight W. So we have differential equations which consists of excitatory term, inhibitory term, and resting term. This is important. Next, my second slide is about network architecture in general. Is about how we feed input to the network and how it operates. The network is called winner takes all. It's a simplest spiking neural network. So let's take a closer look at this part. To the first layer. We know to operate with spiking neural networks, we should convert our input signal to time series. How can we do it for the image? Image can be presented as an integer array. How can we convert an integer array to time series? With the help of Poisson generators. It's a concept I'm going to describe a little bit. You know, there is a Poisson distribution, and it is convenient to think about it as waiting time at the bus stop. If you know that, for example, bus arrives every 15 minutes, then this distribution describes the probability of meeting bus. At start, it is small, it's increase. After 15 minutes, it's maximum, and then it decreases, but not to the zero. So if we imagine buses like spikes, and we can use such mechanism to generate a random spike trail, but with fixed frequency. So we set the frequency of such trail equals to pixel intensity. This way, the lighter pixel generates random spike trail with a few spikes, and a more darker pixel generates spike trail with many files with higher frequency. The next important question: how to feed to the network 60,000 images? We do this by one. This shown in this part of slide. We present first image for 0.35 seconds, which is a third of a second, and then we present an empty image. All the pixels are zeros in this image. Then we present next image, and we call it active mode, and then empty image, then significant image, and empty image, and we repeat this procedure 60,000 times. It takes about 9 hours to do this procedure just by timing restrictions. How our network behaves? It, as I already talked, it consists of 3 layers. First one is 784 Poisson generators. It equals 28 by 28 because we have such number of pixels in the input image. Then we have 100 excitatory neurons. And every pixel of an image read by every excitatory neuron. And all this connection excites neurons. Then we have 100 inhibitory neurons. And that neurons connects with excitatory neurons with one-to-one connection. That connection is very strong, and it guarantees that if excitatory neuron spikes, inhibitory neuron spikes also. And the connections between inhibitory neurons and excitatory neurons is one to all except one. In other words, this connection inhibits excitatory neurons, and it's very specific. For example, this blue inhibitory neuron has one input connection from its corresponding excitatory neuron and has 99 output connections to other excitatory neurons. And that's why the network called winner takes all. If, for example, this red neuron spikes, then spike the inhibitory neuron spikes, and inhibitory neuron inhibit all the other excitatory neurons. So if one spikes, it is a winner and inhibit others. Okay. Next, I'm going to show you a code. 1 second. We have a kernel at Kaggle. You can find it, it's public. We produce an experiment where, okay, 1 second. We trained such a network and use it for real real digit recognition. I will not run this code due to some technical issues, but I show you the source and comment it. At first, we use a special framework called Brian2. Okay. It allows us to use some primitives like synapses, neural groups, Poisson generators, and it allows us to write differential equations in literal form and compute it. So next we use Keras, and we take Mniz datasets from here. We use NumPy and Brian2 components. Next is not important. We load our dataset, and we simplify our task, taking just three classes, 0, 1, and 8. It's a simplification, but it is enough for our experiment. And then I want to show you how spiking neural networks are configured. So at start, we have some global variables which describes leaf neural network model parameters. Then we have a special code snippet which defines differential equations which tell us how we should change the weights according to events of pre- and post-synaptic spikes. And I will return to this part in the end of my talk. Then we have a model. It consists of Poisson generators, which frequencies set it to zeros. Then we have neuron group of excitatory neurons, and you see there is a threshold. It's a condition when spike arrives, postsynaptic spike arrives, V greater than V threshold E. There is a refractory period, the time when the neuron cannot fire again, and there is a reset condition to what value membrane potential should be resetted. Then we have similar inhibitory group, and then we have three groups of synapses. The first one between Poisson generators and excitatory group. It's configured with the STDP equations I showed you earlier. The weights of such synapses are random initialized, and those weights are learned through an experiment. The next two groups of synapses, their weights are fixed and they just operate. So this is group between excitatory group and inhibitory group. It has connections one-to-one, an elegant way to define the connection, E equals G. And the third group condition of connection is E not equals G. The weights of such group are not so strong and not so weak. They are balanced in such a way to balance image pixel inhibition, excitation. So next, we have two methods, train and evaluate. We use train for training and learning weights in the first layer, and we use evaluation for classifying new unknown images. How it behaves. We have an X. X is it's a list of images, and it's an input array. We have a cycle where we set rates of the Poisson generators to the pixel intensities. And remember, the image starts to generate random spike trails. We run network for 0.35 seconds, and then we go passive mode, feed to the network zeros. Okay, this way we did training phase, And I want to return to my slide to comment what is our expectation, what is the result of training. We expect that every excitatory neuron after phase of training specifies to concrete digits. In another way, we should observe some clusters of excitatory neurons which will be active when we present in different digits. For example, first cluster will be active if we present 8, another cluster will be active if we present 0. And what I mean by active, the neuron frequencies are high. So I return to my code. Next, how we this way, if we feed to our network training set, we get weights of the first layer in such a way that excitatory neurons can detect unknown images. Then we can freeze plasticity in this network and present it a new image and observe which cluster will be active, and it will be our prediction. So the next I have some visualization of learning process. The first plot visualize how weight changes during training. You see some changes. And the most interesting plot is this one. It represents how membrane potential of two connected neurons, red is excitatory neuron and blue is corresponding inhibitory neuron, how the membrane potential behaves. At start, image pixels excites the excitatory neuron and its membrane potential grows. Then it reaches threshold, it generates spikes, it follows the spike in the inhibitory neuron, and it instantly resets to be reset. Then it grows up, but we see that from this point it goes down. Why? Because the inhibitory neurons from other excitatory neurons inhibit him. And when its inhibition ends, it excites for the spike and once again. This period is a resting period. There is no excitatory pixels, and we see that membrane potential flows to its resting states. And it repeats for every image. So next, the real experiment. We feed train set to our network with enabled plasticity. We freeze STDP, then we feed the training set again and collect a list of features, which is spike counts for every excitatory neurons. Then we train random forest on those features and we use provided labels. And then we can present training test set to our network and collect new features and use our trained random forest to make a prediction. So this is the result. We got 0.9 accuracy score from this test. But I hope that some of you were puzzled. How could it be? We took some differential equations. We put on top of it random forest, and we got 0.9, which is not so cool actually. And whether it's the result of learning or it's just random results. So to answer these questions, we have a second experiment when we repeat this procedure but without first stage where we use plasticity STDP learning. And it shows 0.7, which is lesser than 0.9, and it shows usefulness of STDP learning. So at the end of my talk, I want to return to to these lines of code. These are differential equations that describes how much we should change the weights during training. These equations underline the phenomenon of local learning in spiking neural networks, which was our talk about, and the most exciting part of my talk. Today, we don't know a good enough form of such equations. A scientific breakthrough in this area had not yet been made. It is possible that whoever can figure out how to write these equations correctly will will do significant breakthrough in a field of artificial intelligence in general. And moreover, maybe even someone is sitting among you right now. That is all. You can find my code on Kaggle. You can contact us on AI Rosatom RU and use our chatbot to get prizes for answering questions. That is all. Thank you. We're glad to answer your questions.
We understand that this talk was rather difficult in terms of technical details, but maybe you have more common questions. Please. Микрофон дайте кто-нибудь.
Excuse me? Yes, sir. Sorry.
Thank you for your talk. And my question is about a practical application of that models. Do you use it in Rosatom company? And if it's not a secret, of course, and which area can be, in which area we can see that models?
Actually, we cannot say that we use spiking neural network in production because the scores we observe is less than classical application. But we know that such solutions have significant
benefits.
Yes. For example, it is about local learning. We can, if we construct such solutions, they will be very energy efficient because there is no backpropagation for learning such network. And if we deal with big networks, so it makes deals. Dmitry?
Yes. Also, as I mentioned during my talk, big companies such as Intel, IBM, different China companies, they have the big departments for developing processes for this type of neural networks. Because it is one of the possible future solutions for the AI solutions of the next decade. Nowadays, yes, we don't achieve usually we don't achieve the state of the art by using these technologies. But there are different reasons for it. For example, actually, this type of neural networks, they are not they are not good for classical machine learning problems. They are good, for example, for robots, for processing sequential data, and so on. And also for development of such type of neural networks, we need special hardware, because maybe you know that the real step forward in classical neural networks was done when GPUs became very wide, and before it there wasn't a wide usage of classical neural networks. And I think that in spiking neural networks it will be the same situation. When we will have a special good hardware, we will make a real step forward. Now we can compare the situation in spiking neural networks as the situation with the classical neural networks in the beginning of the 21st century. Do I answer your question? Other questions? Yes?
No.
Thanks. You have a very good understanding of that process of spiking neural networks, how to educate it, how it's learning, how it's you have a clear structure of the neural network and neural architecture. And you advise for others, what is the most tricky moment in the understanding of this type of neural network architectures? Because what is the most tricky moment to understand it? Because there are a lot of processes for the mind to...
how to understand this
yes,
technology.
What is the most tricky?
I think the best way is to start to study computational neuroscience courses. There are some courses, for example, on Coursera. And during these courses, you will understand how the real neurons work and how to model them, because it is the most important part of this field of science. And then you should try to simulate it on your computer. It is the way to have practice.
Okay. Okay. And in the mathematical models, right? What is the most tricky? Maybe probabilistic part of this, or?
I think the main model for spiking neural networks, it is a leaky integrated fire model, which was described by me during the talk. It is the basic block. Yes, there are more complex models in neuroscience, like Hodgkin-Huxley model, for example. Hodgkin-Huxley, they were awarded by Nobel Prize in 1952 for their work. But actually, you don't need such complex models in spiking neural networks because they don't. They do a lot of useless simulations. You should use this one type of neural networks, more simple neurons, but not so simple as Rosenblatt perceptron. So you need to find something between them. So from one side you have perceptron Rosenblatt with a very simple model, and from the other side you have, for example, Hodgkin-Huxley model with very complex, and you need to find something between them.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, I add that there is a nice course on Coursera, Synapses, Brains, by Aidan Sergeyev, so it has some fundamental concepts described very well. Another question, please.
Лёшка, там еще один вопрос, может, ответим? One moment.
I think it's the last question for today.
If you have more questions, you can find our way in couloirs and to ask something.
We're glad to communicate on the Rosatom stand.
Okay, my question is related to two tests. What is the motivation and purpose behind doing the two tests, test 1 and test 2? And the second thing is the test 1 is somehow overfitting. So how do you find this overfitting related to the task of learning?
Can you repeat, please?
Can you
didn't catch.
My first question is related to the test 1 and test 2. What is the purpose of doing test 1 and test 2? How they are different?
Okay, sure. The first, let me scroll. The first test contains the phase where we use local learning. And if we use it, we get higher score than if we don't. The second test is the same process, but without pre-learning phase.
Okay, so in the first test, there is a high accuracy, probably overfitting the learning task. Overfitting the learning task.
Do you mean that we overfit the learning task?
Yeah.
I don't think because we make also validation tests.
No, it's not overfitting, and because It's not such task where overfitting makes sense. We use random forest here only because we are lazy and we are not going to go deep statistic to make clusters. Random forest is simple. Train it and fit, predict, and that's all. So it just shows that after training phase, we have enough information to cluster our excitatory neurons.
Actually, we use spiking neural network for feature extracting, and when we extract feature, then we use a simple classifier for make the final prediction. Because as you can see, spiking time-independent plasticity it is unsupervised learning, and for classification we need some way to label data, and this is why random forest use on the last step.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So I think we have to finish it. Thank you for being with us today and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.